You see, the biggest mistake most people make when dealing with someone who's avoidant is chasing harder the moment that person pulls away. We panic, we overgive, we explain, we justify all in the hope that they'll finally see our worth. But what you're really doing in that moment is teaching them that your attention is guaranteed, even when theirs isn't, and nothing kills attraction faster than certainty without effort. The truth is, an avoidant doesn't fear losing you when they know you'll always be there. They only start to feel anxious when they realize your world doesn't revolve around them anymore. You make someone anxious about losing you not through manipulation, but through embodiment, through showing, not telling, that your happiness, your purpose, and your peace are not for sale. You're not waiting for them to choose you, you're already choosing yourself. When you stop chasing, something incredible happens. You shift the power dynamic. Instead of waiting by the phone or decoding mixed messages, you start building a life that's too magnetic to be ignored. You become someone whose energy demands respect. You stop begging for clarity and you start giving yourself closure. You stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" and start asking, "Why am I tolerating someone who doesn't step up?" Because here's the truth, avoidant people are often attracted to strength, but they only respect it when they feel it consistently. It's not about playing games, it's about emotional discipline. It's about saying, if you need space, take it. But understand that space might cost you access to me. That's not a threat, that's a boundary. The moment you begin to redirect your focus toward your passions, your friends, your fitness, your growth, that's when they notice. When you stop reacting, they start reflecting. When you stop waiting, they start wondering. And when you stop proving your worth, they start questioning their own. It's not about revenge or making someone suffer. It's about reclaiming your emotional independence. You can care deeply for someone and still protect your peace. You can love someone and still refuse to chase them. You can have empathy for their wounds and still walk away from their inconsistency. That's not cold, that's confidence. So if you want to make an avoidant anxious about losing you, don't shout your worth, show it. Show it in your boundaries, show it in your silence, show it in how quickly you bounce back to joy. Let them see that you are not defined by who stays, but by how you stay true to yourself. The power isn't in pulling away to punish them. The power is in pulling back to protect your energy. Because the moment you start choosing peace over proving, that's when they finally realize what they stand to lose, not just a person, but an entire experience of love that can't be replaced. When you stop chasing and start attracting, everything about the dynamic between you and an avoidant person begins to shift. The avoidant personality often thrives on distance. They feel safest when they're not being pursued too intensely. The moment you start chasing them, explaining yourself, or constantly seeking reassurance, they begin to pull back even more. It's not because you're doing something wrong. It's because they associate closeness with a loss of control. When you chase, they feel trapped. When you stop chasing, they feel curious. What you must understand is that attraction doesn't grow in a space where one person is doing all the work. It grows where both people have the freedom to move toward each other naturally, without pressure or panic. When you stop centering your energy on trying to fix the relationship or trying to prove your worth, you redirect that same energy inward. Suddenly, you're no longer the person begging for attention. You're the person radiating confidence, and confidence, not neediness, is what truly draws people in. Imagine it this way: the sun doesn't chase anyone, it just shines, and people gravitate toward its warmth. You are that sun. Your energy, your purpose, your self-assurance, those are the things that create an irresistible pull. When you live from that place, the avoidant begins to notice something different, a version of you that doesn't depend on them for emotional security. That contrast alone makes them start to question whether they've underestimated your importance. The mistake many people make when dealing with avoidance is thinking that pulling back means being cold or detached. But it's not about becoming indifferent, it's about becoming self-assured. You're not closing your heart, You're simply not handing it over to someone who doesn't value it yet. You're showing that your love is a privilege, not an entitlement. When they feel that shift, when they realize your attention isn't automatic, that's when the fear of loss creeps in. They start to see what their distance might actually cost them: the warmth, the connection, and the emotional safety that you brought into their life. By stepping out of the role of the pursuer, you give the avoidant something they never expected: space that isn't filled with anxiety or demand. That space gives them time to reflect, and reflection often breeds realization. It's in your calm detachment that they begin to miss you. They start wondering what you're doing, who you're with, and why they no longer feel your constant presence. That curiosity is what reignites attraction. It's not manipulation, it's nature. People crave what feels rare, not what feels readily available. You make an avoidant anxious about losing you not by threatening to leave, but by genuinely being okay if you do. The moment you internalize that your value doesn't depend on their approval, you become magnetic. You stop chasing because you already know your worth. That shift in energy from seeking to radiating is what truly makes them turn around. They realize they could lose someone who isn't trying to hold them captive, but was offering them freedom and connection all along. And that's the kind of loss no avoidant wants to risk. Boundaries are often misunderstood as walls built to keep people out, but in reality, they are the framework that teaches others how to treat you. When you're dealing with an avoidant person, boundaries are not about punishment, they are about clarity. You're not trying to control their behavior. You're simply defining what you will and won't accept in your emotional space. The avoidant type often pulls back when things get too intimate because they fear losing autonomy. They test how far they can retreat while still keeping your attention. When you allow this pattern to continue without consequence, you reinforce the idea that they can disappear and return whenever they please. But when you set firm, calm, and consistent boundaries, you shift the tone of the relationship. You're no longer reacting to their distance. You're responding with dignity and composure. The phrase, "if you need space, take it, but understand that space might cost you access to me," isn't a threat, it's truth. It communicates that your energy and presence are valuable, and they're not an open-ended offer. This kind of statement forces an avoidant to confront the reality of their choices. They can have space, but they can't have you waiting indefinitely. That distinction is crucial. Boundaries create a structure in which respect can grow. They make the relationship feel balanced instead of one-sided. When you calmly assert your limits, you're not being dramatic or demanding, you're being self-respecting. The power is not in the words themselves, but in the quiet conviction behind them. Avoidant individuals often subconsciously crave partners who maintain emotional steadiness. They might push against your boundaries at first, but deep down, they feel safer with someone who won't collapse every time they pull away. Your ability to stay grounded, even when they retreat, is what earns their respect. It shows that your sense of identity isn't dependent on their validation. Boundaries signal emotional maturity. They demonstrate that you can love someone deeply without losing yourself in the process. That's a rare kind of strength, and it's one that draws people in rather than pushing them away. Think of boundaries as the invisible guardrails of self-worth. Without them, your relationship becomes a road with no direction, full of detours and collisions. With them, there's clarity, not control, just direction. You're telling the avoidant, "I value connection, but I won't chase it at the cost of my peace." That simple mindset change alters how they see you. You go from being predictable to being powerful. Instead of being someone who tolerates inconsistency, you become someone who embodies self-respect, and people always notice the difference between attachment and confidence. When an avoidant senses that your boundaries come from strength and not from fear, it makes them rethink their distance. They start to realize that while space makes them feel safe, Losing you would create a void they didn't expect. Your calm refusal to participate in emotional chaos makes them anxious in a healthy way, not because you're punishing them, but because they suddenly understand that access to your energy is something they must earn and sustain. Redirecting your energy is one of the most powerful ways to shift the dynamic with an avoidant person. When your attention is consumed by their behavior, wondering why they're distant, overanalyzing every message, or waiting for their next move, you're giving them control over your emotional state. That energy becomes trapped in a cycle of overthinking and self-doubt. But the moment you take that same energy and turn it inward, everything changes. Instead of focusing on what they're doing, you begin focusing on what you can do. You invest that attention into your own growth, passions, friendships, and goals. You start building a life that's so fulfilling, so vibrant, that their absence stops feeling like a loss and starts feeling like space for you to expand. When you redirect your energy, you're not ignoring them, you're reclaiming yourself. You're sending a subtle yet powerful message. I am the center of my own life. The avoidant may have been used to seeing you emotionally available at all times, ready to comfort, to fix, to chase. But when you stop pouring all your emotional resources into them, they feel that shift. Suddenly, they no longer have your constant reassurance. They start wondering where your focus went. That curiosity triggers something deeper, a fear of losing their place in your world. It's not manipulation, it's the natural consequence of you rediscovering your worth. As you begin redirecting your focus, your energy becomes lighter and more magnetic. You reconnect with people who make you laugh, activities that inspire you, and goals that make you proud. You stop checking your phone every few minutes and start living in the present moment again. That shift in energy is palpable. It changes the way you move, speak, and even the way you look. When someone avoids intimacy, they often expect you to collapse into neediness or resentment. But when you respond with calm confidence and joy, it surprises them. It forces them to reevaluate their assumptions about you. They start to sense that they might not be the priority they once were, and that realization creates the kind of tension that makes them reflect, maybe even chase a little. The beauty of redirecting your energy is that it puts you back in alignment with your own power. Instead of using your time trying to decode someone else's emotions, you begin mastering your own. You learn that your fulfillment doesn't depend on whether someone chooses you. It depends on whether you keep choosing yourself. That inner shift radiates outward. It attracts opportunities, people, and experiences that match your new frequency. The avoidant who once felt secure in your devotion begins to feel the subtle anxiety of missing out on your presence. And it's not because you played games, it's because you stopped playing them altogether. When you pour your energy into yourself, you naturally raise your value in every relationship. You stop auditioning for love and start embodying it. You become someone who doesn't need to chase validation because you already live in alignment with your worth. And when you live that way, even the most avoidant person begins to realize that the distance they created might be costing them something irreplaceable, a person who is confident, whole, and no longer waiting. Emotional discipline is one of the most underrated yet powerful traits you can develop. When dealing with an avoidant person, it's the ability to manage your emotional reactions rather than letting them control you. When someone with avoidant tendencies pulls back, your instinct may be to chase, to fix, or to demand answers. That reaction comes from fear, the fear of being abandoned, misunderstood, or unloved. But emotional discipline teaches you to pause, to breathe, and to observe instead of react. It's not about suppressing your emotions. It's about channeling them into strength rather than chaos. The moment you choose calm over panic, you take back your power. Because while you can't control what they do, you can absolutely control how you respond. Avoidant people often operate on emotional patterns. When things get too close, they retreat to protect themselves. When you react emotionally to their withdrawal, it validates their fear that closeness leads to conflict or overwhelm. But when you respond with composure, it disarms that pattern. It communicates that you are emotionally safe, not reactive or unpredictable. That stability unsettles them, not because it's threatening, but because it's rare. They expect an argument, a desperate text, or an emotional plea. Instead, they're met with quiet confidence. That contrast makes them start to question their own behavior. They begin to feel that something valuable is slipping away, not because you shouted or begged, but because you didn't. Emotional discipline is not about pretending you don't care. It's about caring from a place of self-respect. You can feel disappointed, hurt, or confused, and still choose to respond with grace. That choice builds inner strength. It sends a message to both yourself and the other person that your emotions are valid, but they don't dictate your decisions. You can want someone and still walk away if they don't show up for you. That's emotional maturity in its highest form, and it's that level of maturity that begins to shift how an avoidant sees you, from someone who reacts to every pullback to someone who moves with intention and self-assurance. When you master emotional discipline, silence becomes your ally. You stop explaining yourself repeatedly or trying to force understanding. Instead, you let your actions and your consistency speak. You learn to sit in discomfort without losing your balance. That stillness, that emotional control, creates intrigue. The avoidant begins to feel uneasy, not because you're playing a game, but because your composure reveals their inconsistency. They realize that while they were pulling away to test safety, you were quietly proving you didn't need to chase to feel secure. The real power of emotional discipline lies in how it transforms your presence. You stop radiating anxiety and start radiating peace. You become someone who doesn't demand attention but naturally commands it. Your energy shifts from "please stay" to "I'll be fine either way." That is the moment the avoidant feels the shift, the anxiety of losing someone whose calm they once took for granted. Because while attraction can start with chemistry, it's sustained by emotional stability. And once they sense that your peace is not dependent on their behavior, they begin to understand that they could lose something far more valuable than just your affection. They could lose your presence, your steadiness, and your quiet strength. Confidence over control is the essence of what truly makes someone magnetic, especially when you're dealing with an avoidant person. Control comes from fear, the fear of being left, misunderstood, or replaced. It's the instinct to hold tighter when someone starts to drift away. But confidence, on the other hand, comes from trust in yourself, in your value, and in your ability to handle whatever comes your way. The avoidant type often feels suffocated by control because it mirrors the very thing they're trying to escape: emotional pressure. When you let go of the need to control the outcome and instead focus on embodying quiet confidence, you flip the entire dynamic. You move from trying to make them stay to making them want to stay. Confidence isn't loud or forceful. It's calm and self-assured. It says, "I don't need to chase because I already know what I bring to the table." This energy is rare, and it's exactly what captures an avoidant's attention. They are used to people trying to convince them to stay, explain their worth, or fix the connection. But when you operate from confidence, you break that pattern. You show that you can love deeply without losing your balance. You can care without clinging. You can be vulnerable without being desperate. That kind of emotional security is magnetic because it communicates that your sense of peace isn't negotiable. You're not trying to control their behavior, you're controlling your focus, your standards, and your emotional energy. Confidence also means allowing things to unfold naturally, even when uncertainty feels uncomfortable. You stop checking your phone every few minutes. You stop replaying every conversation, and you stop assuming the worst. Instead, you trust that what's meant for you will never need to be forced. That mindset alone changes the way you show up. It allows you to stay grounded and consistent, even when the avoidant retreats. You respond with grace, not panic. You express yourself honestly, not fearfully. You choose alignment over approval, and because of that, you become the kind of person who commands respect without ever demanding it. The avoidant, who once believed they could keep you close without fully committing, begins to sense that something is different. They feel the shift in your energy, the ease, the self-assurance, the quiet certainty that you will be okay whether they step up or not. That realization plants a seed of anxiety, not because you're manipulating them, but because they finally grasp that losing you means losing someone grounded, loving, and emotionally stable. It's the kind of realization that often pushes them to self-reflect. They start questioning whether their distance is worth the risk of losing something so rare. True confidence doesn't chase validation, it creates attraction. It doesn't fight for attention, it earns it through self-respect. The moment you stop trying to control the situation and instead embody the peace of someone who knows their worth, you become unforgettable. You show that your love is powerful but not desperate, that your presence is a gift, not a guarantee. And that is when the avoidant finally begins to feel what you felt all along, the weight of possibly losing someone who never tried to control them, only invited them into something real. In the end, making an avoidant person anxious about losing you isn't about playing games or using emotional tactics. It's about rediscovering your own power. It's about showing, through your peace and self-worth, that your love is a choice, not an obligation. When you stop chasing and start embodying your value, you no longer need to beg for what's already meant for you. You become the calm in a world of chaos, the strength that commands respect, and the energy that can't be replaced. Thank you for listening, for opening your heart to growth, and for remembering that the most powerful relationship you'll ever have is the one you build with yourself.